The pounding on the door cut through the darkness like a blade. Ethan Brooks jerked awake, heart already racing before his brain registered why. The red numbers on his alarm clock burned in the blackness, 5 o'clock a.m. Three more knocks harder this time, rattling the cheap hinges of his Capitol Hill apartment. Nobody showed up at this hour with good news. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, feet hitting cold hardwood. The space around him was small but familiar second-hand couch, visible through the bedroom door, handmade bookshelf he'd built last winter, the kind of modest life a data analyst could afford in Seattle. After Sarah walked out 3 years ago, he'd told himself he preferred it this way. Predictable. Safe. No surprises that could rip the floor out from under him. This was not part of that plan. Ethan grabbed his phone from the nightstand like a weapon and moved toward the door. His gray t-shirt hung loose on one shoulder, sweatpants wrinkled from sleep. Through the peephole, the hallway light flickered half-dead bulb. The building manager kept promising to fix, revealing only a blurred silhouette. Too tall to be random, too still to be drunk. The voice came through the door and his stomach dropped. It was Diana Sterling, not just Diana Sterling from accounting or Diana Sterling who worked on the third floor. Diana Sterling, CEO of Sterling Systems, the woman whose name appeared on every company-wide email, whose office occupied the entire top floor, whose presence in a conference room made 200 people fall silent. That Diana Sterling stood outside his apartment at 5 in the morning. Ethan's hand moved to the lock without conscious thought. When he pulled the door open, the sight knocked the air from his lungs. She looked nothing like the polished executive he'd seen in meetings. Blonde hair fell from a messy ponytail. Mascara smeared dark tracks down her cheeks. Her eyes, the sharp green eyes that could spot errors in quarterly reports from across a room, were red and swollen, hollowed by something that looked like hours of crying. The power suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a rumpled blazer. She held her purse against her chest like a shield. His mouth opened, but nothing came out for a second. Then, Diana, what happened? Are you okay? She didn't answer right away. Her gaze moved over him, taking in his sleep-disheveled state, then past him into the apartment. He saw her register the small living room, the thrift store couch, the stack of books on the coffee table, the basket of unfolded laundry. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. Can I come in? Every logical impulse screamed at once. This was his CEO, a woman so far above him on the organizational chart they occupied different planets. Letting her into his home at 5 in the morning felt like the opening scene of a disaster. What if someone saw her? What if this was some bizarre test? What if he said the wrong thing and Monday morning found him cleaning out his desk, but then he looked at her face again, at the pain carved into the lines around her mouth, at the way her shoulders curved inward like she was trying to hold herself together through sheer force of will. He couldn't say no. Ethan stepped back and widened the door. Yeah, come in. She moved past him and he caught the scent of expensive perfume layered over something sour wine maybe, or exhaustion made manifest. Her heels clicked softly on the floor, but her steps were small, careful, nothing like the confident stride he'd witnessed in the office corridors. She stopped in the middle of his living room and looked around. The thrift store couch, the old television, the framed photos on the wall, the laundry basket. His entire world could probably fit inside her walk-in closet. I'm sorry. Diana turned towards him and he saw her fighting to maintain composure. I shouldn't be here. I don't know what I was thinking. This is completely wrong. I should go. She took a step toward the door. Without thinking, Ethan moved to block her path. Diana, wait. He kept his voice low, gentle, the way he used to talk to Sarah when she came home after brutal days at her law firm. You came here for a reason. Whatever it is, you don't have to leave. Just talk to me. She stared at him for a long moment. He could see the war behind her eyes, part of her desperate to run, part of her begging not to. Then her shoulders dropped and she let out a slow breath. I had a date tonight. A laugh escaped her throat, sharp and joyless. God, that sounds so stupid when I say it out loud. I'm 41 years old and I'm showing up at someone's door at 5 in the morning, crying about a bad date like I'm 16. Sit down, Ethan pointed at the couch. Please, let me make some coffee. To his surprise, she listened. The woman who commanded hundreds of employees sat on his cheap couch like she was afraid she might break it, perched right on the edge, back, straight hands folded tight in her lap. He went into the kitchen and started the coffee maker. The old machine rattled and wheezed. He'd bought it after Sarah left when he was rebuilding his life with what little money he had. But the sound was comforting, the normalcy of it. He poured grounds into the filter and hit the button, then called over his shoulder, "How do you take your coffee?" "Black, 1 sugar." Her voice sounded steadier, now pulled back from whatever edge she'd been standing on. While the coffee brewed, Ethan leaned against the counter and watched her through the doorway. She wasn't looking at him. Instead, her gaze had fixed on the bookshelf near the window, the one he'd made from reclaimed oak mortise and tenon joints, his father's voice in his head the whole time he worked. Next to it, the coffee table with its inlaid pattern. Both handmade, both functional and simple. When the coffee finished, he poured 2 mugs and brought them back. He handed one to her and sat in the armchair across from the couch. Not too close, not too far. She wrapped both hands around the mug like she was cold, even though the room was warm. She took a sip and closed her eyes for a second. "This is good coffee." The words came out quiet, almost surprised. "Just grocery store stuff. Nothing special." She opened her eyes and really looked at him then, like she was searching for something in his face. His name was Derek Parker. The words tumbled out suddenly as if she'd been holding them in, and they finally broke free. "Venture capitalist, big office downtown, drives a Tesla naturally. We met at some networking event 3 weeks ago, right after my divorce papers were finalized." Ethan stayed quiet. Sometimes people just needed space to let the words out. "We went to the Metropolitan Grill." Diana continued, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "White tablecloths, the kind of place where you can smell the price." He spent 2 hours talking about himself, his portfolio, his contacts, his opinions on market trends. Every time I tried to speak, he would smile and nod and then keep going like I'd never opened my mouth. Ethan could see it perfectly. Some guy in a perfectly tailored suit in love with the sound of his own voice, treating conversation like a performance. Then during dessert, Diana's voice dropped lower. He leaned in and told me he respected ambitious women, that it was attractive, honestly, but he said men still need to feel important. He said maybe if we were in a relationship, he could handle the big decisions and I could focus on the smaller things, so I wouldn't stress about important matters so much. She paused, quote unquote. Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't trust himself to speak yet. "I didn't throw my drink in his face." Diana's laugh was brittle. "I wanted to, but I didn't. I put down my fork, told him the evening was over, paid for my own meal, and walked out." Calm, professional, exactly what everyone expects from Diana Sterling, CEO. "Good for you." Ethan meant it. "Is it?" Her voice cracked and fresh tears welled in her eyes. "Because I sat in my car for almost an hour after that. He's the third man in 2 weeks who made me feel like I'm too much, too successful, too opinionated, too independent, too everything." Her hands shook around the mug. "My ex-husband said the same thing, that I cared more about the company than our marriage, that I was married to my work, not to him. Maybe he was right. Maybe I built this whole career and lost everything that actually matters." "That's not true." His voice came out firmer than he expected. "How would you know?" she snapped, then immediately looked away. "Sorry, I shouldn't talk to you like that." "It's okay. You're upset." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "For what it's worth, anyone who makes you feel like you're too much is really just saying you're more than they can handle. That's their problem, not yours." Diana looked back at him, genuine surprise crossing her face. Something softened in the tense line of her shoulders. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Say exactly the right thing." She studied him carefully. "You've been doing it since I got here. No questions about why I'm here. No judgment. Just calm." Ethan shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "I don't know. I just treat people like people. Not job titles, not positions. Just people having a rough night." She was quiet for a moment, her fingers tightening around the mug. "That's why I came here." The admission came slowly, like she was testing each word before releasing it. "Or one of the reasons." His heart kicked up speed. "What do you mean?" Diana set the coffee down on the table with careful precision. Then she stood. Ethan stood too instinctive, and suddenly they were only a few feet apart in his small living room. The space between them felt charged, dangerous. "I went home after that date." Her voice was barely above a whisper. to my perfect penthouse with its perfect furniture and perfect view. I stood there in the dark and realized I couldn't remember the last time I felt happy. Not proud, not successful, happy. She looked up at him, and for the first time he saw real fear in her eyes. I thought about work, about people there, and I realized you're the only person in that whole building who treats me like I'm human. The words came faster now. You hold the elevator when I'm carrying reports. You say good morning like you actually mean it. You stopped one night to ask if I was okay when I was working late. Nobody else did. Ethan remembered that night. She'd been behind the glass walls of her executive office at 11 p.m. and everyone else had gone home. He'd been heading to the parking garage when he saw her hunched over her desk. Something about the curve of her spine had looked so exhausted, so alone, that he'd knocked on the glass and asked through the door if she needed anything. She'd said no, but she'd also smiled a real smile, not the professional one she used in meetings. I looked up your address. Diana's admission came quiet but steady. In the employee emergency contact system. I know that's wrong, an invasion of privacy, but I needed. She stopped searching for words. I needed to see this. A life that makes sense. A person who seems real. She took one small step closer. His heart hammered against his ribs. You're the only person I wanted to talk to. The whisper was so soft he almost missed it. The only one I trusted not to just see the CEO. Her hand lifted slowly, giving him plenty of time to move away. He didn't. Her palm came to rest flat on his chest, right over his heart. The heat of her touch burned through his thin t-shirt. He knew she could feel how fast his heart was beating. He could see the pulse jumping in her throat. I can feel it. Her voice dropped even lower. So maybe I'm not the only one feeling something. She was right. Whatever this was, it wasn't one-sided. The awareness had been building for months, the way his attention sharpened whenever she entered a room, the way he found himself noticing details about her that he had no business noticing. How she took her coffee, the perfume she wore, the way she bit her lower lip when she was thinking through a problem. I feel something too. His throat was tight, words coming out rough. But I'm scared. You're my CEO. If this goes wrong, I don't just lose you. I lose my job, my safe little life, everything I've built after Sarah left. Her face fell, but she nodded understanding. So what do we do? We're careful. The words felt inadequate even as he said them. We don't decide everything at 5 in the morning when you're hurt and I'm half asleep. We take time, we think. We don't rush. Her eyes closed and a tear slipped down her cheek. I came here hoping you'd tell me I was crazy. That would have been easier. I know. His hand moved of its own accord, coming up to cover hers where it rested on his chest. But I've never been good at that easy. They stood there in his small living room as the sky outside began its slow shift from black to gray. Her hand on his chest, his hand covering hers. Both of them caught between fear and something that felt dangerously like hope. And he knew with sharp, sudden clarity that nothing about his life was going to be simple after this morning. When Diana finally left at 7, the city was waking up. She stood in his doorway, composed again, but different somehow, softer around the edges. Thank you for the coffee and for listening. Anytime. She turned to go, then paused. Ethan, that night I saw you working late when you asked if I was okay. Her green eyes held his. I lied. I wasn't okay. But the fact that you asked. She didn't finish the sentence, just gave him a small, sad smile and walked away. He closed the door and leaned against it, staring at the empty coffee mug she'd left on his table. Her lipstick had left a faint mark on the rim. The apartment still smelled like her perfume. He picked up the mug and carried it to the kitchen, but instead of washing it, he set it carefully on the counter. Evidence that he hadn't imagined any of it. Saturday morning arrived cold and gray. Ethan drove his aging Honda through Seattle's rain-slicked streets toward Ballard, where his father's house sat on a quiet street lined with craftsman homes. Frank Brooks had lived in the same place for 40 years, raised Ethan there after his mother died when Ethan was 22. The workshop in the garage held more memories than the house itself. When Ethan pulled into the driveway, he could see light spilling from the open garage door. Inside, Frank stood at his workbench, white hair catching the fluorescent light, hands moving over a half-finished birdhouse. His father was 67 now, still broad-shouldered, but thinner than he used to be. His hands trembled slightly, arthritis that had gotten worse over the past year. Hey, Dad, let me finish that. Frank looked up and his weathered face creased into a smile. You worry too much, son. I'm fine. Your hands are shaking. They shake a little, doesn't mean I'm broken. But he set down the sandpaper and gestured toward the workbench. You can help with the detail work if it makes you feel better. Ethan picked up where his father left off, running fine grit sandpaper over the edges of the birdhouse. The repetitive motion was soothing. He'd learned woodworking in this garage, spent countless hours listening to his father explain joints and grain and the patience required to make something that would last. You look tired. Frank leaned against the bench, studying his son. Something on your mind? Ethan kept his eyes on the wood. Someone came to see me yesterday morning. Early, she needed to talk. Frank's eyebrow raised slightly. It's complicated. Most worthwhile things are. His father crossed his arms. This someone is she special. Ethan's hands stilled. Maybe, probably, but it can't work. There are too many reasons why it's a bad idea. Frank was quiet for a moment. Then he reached out and took the birdhouse from Ethan's hands, setting it aside. He moved to a shelf and pulled down a piece of figured maple, its grains swirling in beautiful complex patterns. The kind of wood that cost serious money. Son, I taught you woodworking. First rule I ever gave you, remember? Ethan thought back to his teenage years, the first time his father had let him work on something important. Don't be afraid of good wood. That's right. Frank ran his fingers over the maple surface. Good wood is worth the extra care. Takes more time, more attention. You have to respect it. But when you're done, you've made something that lasts. Something worth keeping. He set the wood down and looked at his son directly. Now, I'm guessing we're not really talking about lumber here. No. A small smile tugged at Ethan's mouth despite himself. This woman, the one who showed up at your door. You're afraid of her. Not because but because she's good. Worth the risk. And that terrifies you. The accuracy of it hit hard. Ethan leaned back against the workbench. Sarah said I was too average for her, that I had no ambition. She wanted someone who wanted more money, more success, more everything. When she left, I told myself I was fine with average, that wanting a simple life was enough. But this woman, she makes me want to try. And that scares me because what if I try and fail? What if she realizes Sarah was right and I'm just... He couldn't finish. Frank put a hand on his shoulder, the grip still strong despite the trembling. Listen to me. Your mother, God, rest her, she didn't marry me because I was ambitious. She married me because I showed up, because I did what I said I would do, because when life got hard, I didn't run. His voice roughened with emotion. You're not average, Ethan. You're steady. There's a difference. The world's full of ambitious people who can't be trusted to stay when things get tough. But steady, that's rare. Ethan felt his throat tighten. I don't want to mess this up. Then don't. But don't let fear steal something before you even try out. Frank squeezed his shoulder once and let go. Now tell me about this woman. What's her name? Diana. Frank smiled. Then I hope I get to meet Diana someday. Monday morning felt wrong from the moment Ethan woke. The sky over Seattle was gray as always, but everything inside him felt loud and restless. He made coffee, drank half without tasting it, and his apartment still carried traces of her perfume, even though she'd left 48 hours ago. Her empty mug sat on the counter where he'd left it unwashed, like proof. The entire encounter hadn't been some fever dream. At work, he arrived 15 minutes early out of habit, swiped his badge through the lobby scanner, took the elevator up with two coworkers discussing some football game he hadn't watched. He nodded at the right moments, but his mind was elsewhere, wondering if Diana was already here, wondering if she regretted everything. At his desk, Ethan opened his laptop and tried to lose himself in spreadsheets. Numbers were simple. They followed rules. You could sort them and filter them and make sense of the patterns. Hearts didn't work like that. At 10:15, his calendar pinged. All hands meeting, 10:30 main conference room. Attendance mandatory. His stomach tightened. He pushed back from his desk and stood slowly, knowing these big meetings usually meant something important. New project announcements, restructuring, acquisitions, layoffs. The main conference room was already crowded when he walked in. People clutched coffee cups and water bottles, talking in low voices, positioning themselves for a good view. Ethan found a spot near the back wall. He liked being where he could see everyone, but nobody really saw him. At exactly 10:30, the door near the front opened. Diana Sterling walked in. She looked like a completely different person from the woman who'd stood in his living room 3 days ago. Her blonde hair was pulled back in an immaculate twist. Her makeup was flawless. She wore a navy suit that fit her like armor tailored precisely, and her heels clicked with that same strong, steady rhythm he'd heard 100 times before. If he hadn't been there that morning, if he hadn't held her empty coffee mug in his hands, he would think she was fine, untouchable. The Ice Queen everyone whispered about. But he knew better now. He saw the faint shadows under her eyes that powder couldn't quite hide. He saw the way she held her shoulders just a fraction too tight. He saw her hand grip the edge of the podium for half a second before letting it go. "Thank you all for coming." Her voice was clear and commanding, filling the room effortlessly. "I'll keep this brief." The room went silent. 200 people waiting. "We've been approached by Cascade Equity with an acquisition offer." The word hit like a stone dropped into still water. Acquisition. People shifted in their seats. Someone near the front swore softly. Another person whispered, "No way." Dana raised one hand and the room quieted again. "Before anyone panics, take a breath. No decisions have been made. The board and I are reviewing the offer carefully. Any deal would include strong protections for employees. Your jobs are not about to disappear." She started laying out details. Cascade Equity was a large investment group. They were interested in acquiring Sterling Systems while maintaining the brand. They would bring more resources, broader reach. There would be changes, there were always changes, but she was pushing for terms that kept the team intact and protected. People asked questions. She answered each one with calm precision. This was the Diana Sterling that Ethan had watched from a distance for 3 years, sharp, controlled, brilliant. The woman who could hold a room of anxious employees and make them believe things would be okay. But every now and then, her eyes skimmed across the crowd and landed on him. Just for a second. Just long enough for him to feel it like a hand on his chest. Each time it happened, he looked away, not trusting his face to stay neutral. When the meeting ended, people stood at once, and the room filled with noise. Some looked angry, some looked scared. Some looked excited at the prospect of cashing out stock options. Some clearly didn't care as long as their paychecks arrived on time. Ethan tried to slip out with the crowd blending into the mass exodus toward the elevators. "Ethan Brooks." Her voice cut through the noise like a bell. He froze. Diana was still at the front of the room, gathering her notes into a leather portfolio. Her eyes found his across the crowded space. "Could you stay for a few minutes? I have a question about the quarterly data projections." The words sounded perfectly normal, perfectly professional, but he knew this wasn't about numbers. "Sure." People filed out. The door finally closed with a soft click, and the room felt too big suddenly, too quiet. Diana set her papers down but didn't move from the front. They stood there for a long moment, separated by 15 feet, and everything that had happened between them. "How are you?" Her voice was softer now, the CEO tone stripped away. "I should ask you that." Ethan took a couple of steps closer but stopped halfway. "That was a big announcement." "I'm managing." She paused. "But that's not why I asked you to stay." He waited. "I meant what I said the other night." Diana's hands came together in front of her fingers lacing. "In your apartment. All of it." His heart started to pound. "Diana, I know this is messy. I know it's complicated. I know I'm your boss. I know there's an acquisition offer on the table. I know this is possibly the worst timing in the world." Her green eyes locked on his. "But pretending nothing happened isn't something I can do." The weight of her words settled over him. He swallowed hard, mouth dry. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to tell me the truth." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I want to know if I'm alone in this. Did you feel anything that night, or was it just me living in my head?" The question hung between them, simple and dangerous and impossible to ignore. He could lie. He could say it was a strange night and nothing more. It would be safer. He could go back to his quiet life with his old coffee maker and secondhand couch and careful distance from anything that might hurt him. But when he looked at her, he didn't just see his CEO. He saw the woman who'd sat on his worn couch with her hands wrapped around a cheap mug. The woman who'd told him she was tired of feeling like she was too much for everyone. The woman who'd put her hand on his chest and felt his heart race. "You're not alone." His voice came out rough, barely more than a whisper. "I felt it too." Something in her relaxed just slightly, but he saw it. Her shoulders dropped. Her eyes grew bright with something that might have been tears or might have been relief. "Then why are we standing this far apart?" The question was soft, almost playful. Ethan let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "Because I'm terrified. Because you just announced a possible acquisition that could change your whole life. Because my life is about paying rent on time and keeping my head down and not taking risks. We live in different worlds, Diana. So we build a bridge." She said it like the answer was simple. "People do it every day." "I had a girlfriend once." The words came out before he could stop them. "Sarah, she left 3 years ago because I chose a quieter life. She said I had no ambition, that I was happy being average." I'm still scared of hearing that again. Of being not enough, especially for someone like you. Diana's face softened at that. "I'm not your ex. I'm not going to punish you for knowing what you want, for choosing balance. That's something I wish I'd learned sooner." She took a step toward him, closing some of the distance. "You said we should be careful. You were right. We should be. But I also know I walked into your apartment at the worst moment of my life, and you were the only person I wanted to see." Her voice trembled slightly. "So here's my question. Can you live with pretending none of that happened? Can you look at me in the hallway and act like I'm just your CEO and nothing more?" The answer came fast, automatic, too honest. "No." They both heard the certainty in it. "I can't either." She closed her eyes for a second, like she was fighting back emotion. When she opened them again, they were clear and focused. "Then we have two choices. We ignore this and try to go back to the way things were. Or we try to find a way forward that doesn't destroy us both. And if there's no way," his voice came out quieter than he intended, "then at least we were honest. At least we tried." She straightened her shoulders, and he saw the steel underneath. "I can live with heartbreak. I can't live with what if forever." Her words sank into him. He thought of his small apartment, his old coffee maker, his safe routines. But he also thought of the way his heart had moved when she'd said he was the only one who treated her like a person. The way her hand had felt pressed against his chest. "I need time." The admission felt like surrender and relief at once. "I can't decide something like this in a conference room. Not when everything's still upside down." Diana nodded slowly. "Take the time you need. I won't push you. I promise." She gathered her papers and headed for the door, heels clicking against the floor. His chest tightened at the thought of just letting her walk away like this, of going back to treating each other like strangers. "Diana." She stopped and looked back. "For what it's worth." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I wish I was braver." The corner of her mouth lifted in something that wasn't quite a smile but was close. "I see more courage in you than you see in yourself. I see someone who knows what he values and lives by it. That's rare." She opened the door. Before stepping through it, she looked back one more time. "I'm not asking you to change who you are. I'm asking you to think about whether there's space in that life for me." The door closed behind her with a quiet click. Ethan stood alone in the empty conference room. Heart pounding, head spinning, feeling like the floor beneath him had shifted, and he wasn't sure if he was falling or flying. Back at his desk, the afternoon crawled by. He stared at his screen, but the numbers blurred. Every email notification made his pulse jump. Around 3, Tom Harrison rolled his chair over, coffee cup in hand. "You okay, man? You look like you just got audited." Ethan forced a smile. "Just tired." That acquisition thing's got everyone on edge. Tom took a sip of coffee. "Cascade's solid, though. If it goes through, probably means stability. Maybe even better benefits." "Yeah, probably." Tom studied him for a moment. "You sure you're good? You've been weird since the meeting." "I'm fine, just thinking." His friend didn't look convinced, but let it drop. "Drinks tonight, Murphy's. We're doing our usual Monday thing." Ethan almost said no, but the thought of sitting alone in his apartment sounded worse. "Yeah, I'll be there." Friday arrived. The week had passed in a strange blur, days at work where he and Diana maintained careful distance, nights where he lay awake thinking about her hand on his chest, her voice asking if he felt it too. On Tuesday, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was simple. "This is Diana. I got your number from the employee directory. I know that's probably wrong, but honesty is kind of our thing now. Can we talk not at the office, somewhere neutral?" His thumb hovered over the keyboard. He could say no, could tell her they needed to keep things professional, could choose the easy path. Instead, his fingers moved when her reply came fast. "Friday night, 7. There's a coffee shop on Pine Street, Brew Haven. Do you know it?" He did. It was small, quiet, the kind of place where you could actually hear the person across from you. "I know it. I'll be there." "Thank you, Ethan." Really. The days between that text and Friday night stretched and compressed in equal measure. At work, they were careful. No long looks, no private jokes, no extra attention. In meetings where she spoke at the front of the room, he listened from his usual spot and back. To anyone watching, they were just CEO and data analyst, nothing more. But inside, Ethan was counting down. Friday evening came. He left his apartment at 6:30, the air cool and carrying the perpetual threat of Seattle rain. His hands wouldn't stop shaking, so he shoved them in his jacket pockets. Brew Haven glowed warm through its front windows. When he peered inside, Diana was already there. Of course she was. She was early to everything. She sat at a small table in the back corner, blazer draped over the chair beside her. She wore a simple cream blouse, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back. There were 2 cups on the table. His heart kicked hard as he pushed the door open. The bell above it gave a soft ring. She looked up, and for a second, the professional mask slipped completely. He saw pure nervousness on her face. Hope and fear mixed together. "Hi." Her voice was soft. "Hi." His came out rougher than he expected. He walked over and sat across from her. She pushed one of the cups toward him. "Black with 1 sugar." I remembered. He took a sip. It was perfect. For a moment, they just sat there, the low hum of the coffee shop around them, feeling too normal for what this was. "I've been thinking about what you said." Diana began, her hands wrapped around her own cup. "About being careful." His chest tightened. He braced himself for the words that would end this before it started. "It was a mistake. You were right. We should forget it." "You were right." She paused. "We do need to be careful." He nodded, looking down at his coffee, trying to keep his face neutral. "But," the word pulled his eyes back to her, "I've also been thinking about how I've lived my life so far. I take risks in business all the time. I bet everything on companies and deals and numbers. But when it comes to my own heart, I hide. I choose work every time because it feels safe." She let out a slow breath. "I'm tired of that. I'm tired of going home to a perfect apartment I hate. I'm tired of smiling through bad dates with men who only see my job title. I'm tired of running my life like it's another company to manage." Her eyes met his across the small table. "I can't stop thinking about that night. Not just because I was upset, but because you saw me. The real me. You didn't treat me like a boss who broke down. You treated me like a person who was hurting. I don't get that often, if ever. I can't stop thinking about it either." The admission felt dangerous. "Every time I try to focus at work, my brain just throws your face in front of me." A small, shaky smile touched her mouth. "So I need to know, is this something you actually want to explore, or were you just being kind that night?" "I was being kind." He set his cup down. His hands weren't steady. "But not only kind." He took a breath. "Diana, I like you. Not the title, not the power, you. The woman who sat on my couch and said she felt like she was too much. The woman who admits she's lonely even when everyone thinks she has everything." Her eyes shone, but she didn't look away. "I like you too. More than I planned to. More than I probably should." There it was. The thing they'd been dancing around, finally spoken out loud between them. "I'm still scared." His voice was quiet. "Scared of losing my job. Scared of people finding out. Scared I won't be enough for you. And I'm scared too." She leaned forward slightly. "Scared of hurting you. Scared of the power imbalance. Scared of being selfish. But I'm more scared of walking away and wondering for the rest of my life what might have happened if we'd tried. They sat there with fear and hope sitting between them like a third person at the table. What if we do try? Her voice carried a tremor. What would that even look like? Ethan thought about it for a long moment, aware that his answer mattered. We start with this, talking in a coffee shop. Nothing secretive, nothing shady, just two people getting to know each other outside of work. We take it slow, honest. Inside the office, we stay professional. No flirting, no sneaking around. And if at any point it feels wrong, we stop and talk about it. Her shoulders loosened visibly. I can do that, slow and honest. And one more thing, he held her gaze. No big physical moves until we both feel ready. No doing something in the heat of the moment and regretting it later. Her cheeks flushed slightly, but she nodded. Agreed. So we're doing this. It wasn't quite a question. I think we are. She smiled for real this time, and the transformation was stunning. They both laughed, then soft and surprised, like they hadn't expected to feel this light. They stayed for over an hour, started with small things, her coffee preference, his favorite takeout place, the best time to walk by the waterfront when tourists were sparse, then moved into bigger territory. She told him about growing up in a small town outside Eugene raised by a single mother who worked two jobs, about pushing herself through school and business and every promotion because she was terrified of ending up with nothing. He told her about his father, the union carpenter, about his mother's bookstore that never made money but always felt like home, about working at a startup with 80-hour weeks and big promises and leaving it all to come to Sterling Systems for something more steady, about how Sarah saw that as failure. Sarah wanted a version of success that made sense to her. Diana's voice was gentle. That doesn't mean she was right. Still hurt. I know. When they finally left Brewhaven, the sky was dark and city lights reflected off wet pavement. She walked with him to the corner, neither of them quite ready to separate yet. Thank you. She turned to face him under the streetlight. For coming, for listening, for being brave. I don't feel brave. You showed up. Her voice was firm. That counts. They didn't hug, didn't kiss. Just stood there for an extra second, both wanting more and choosing not to rush it. Then she smiled once more and walked toward where her car was parked. He watched until she turned the corner and disappeared, then started toward his own car, feeling like something fundamental had shifted in his life. Over the next 2 weeks, a strange new rhythm took shape. At work, nothing changed on the surface. Ethan sat at his desk running reports and sending emails. In meetings where Diana spoke at the front of the room, he listened from his usual spot. They were meticulous about maintaining distance. No long looks, no private jokes, no reason for anyone to suspect anything. But outside the office, everything was different. Coffee on Saturday mornings at different shops around the city, walks along the waterfront on Sunday afternoons. A movie at the Grand Illusion on Wednesday evening, a small art house theater where nobody cared who sat in the dark. Dinner at places that didn't require reservations months in advance. They talked constantly about everything and nothing, about their pasts and fears and habits. She told him about her ex-husband James and how they'd slowly turned into co-workers instead of partners. He told her about the night Sarah had given him back his apartment key and called him average. You're steady. Diana said it with conviction. There's a difference. There were moments when he almost reached for her hand and stopped himself. Moments when she sat across from him, laughing at some dumb joke he'd made, and all he wanted was to lean across the table. But they waited, and somehow the waiting made it feel more real. They were building a foundation first. At the same time, the acquisition talks were heating up. Some days, Diana got pulled into back-to-back meetings with lawyers and board members. She'd leave the office looking more exhausted than he'd ever seen her. On a Wednesday evening in the third week, Cassandra Wells stopped by Ethan's desk just as he was packing up to leave. Ethan, quick question about the Q3 projections. He looked up. Cassandra was 38, ambitious, always immaculately dressed. She'd been VP of product for 2 years, and everyone knew she had her eyes on bigger things. What about them? Just wanted to make sure they're accurate. You know, with everything going on, the board's scrutinizing every number. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Diana's relying heavily on your analysis for the acquisition discussions. That's a lot of responsibility for someone at your level. The subtext was clear. Don't screw up. He kept his voice neutral. The numbers are solid. I've triple-checked everything. I'm sure you have. She leaned against his desk. It's interesting, though. Diana seems to trust you quite a bit, more than some of the senior analysts. His pulse quickened. I do good work. Of course. Cassandra straightened. Just make sure that trust is based on the right things. She walked away before he could respond. Tom rolled his chair over as soon as she was out of earshot. What was that about? She's nervous about the acquisition. Everyone is. Maybe. Tom didn't look convinced, but that felt like a warning shot. Friday morning, Ethan was in the braid room pouring coffee when his phone buzzed. An email from Margaret Walsh in HR. Please schedule a brief meeting with me at your earliest convenience to discuss workplace policies. His stomach dropped. He stared at the email, reading it 3 times, trying to parse if there was subtext he was missing. Workplace policies could mean anything. Could be nothing. Could be everything. He replied, available today at 2 p.m., if that works. Her response came within 2 minutes. See you then. At 2 o'clock, he walked to HR on shaking legs. Margaret Walsh's office was small and organized everything in its place. She was 53, gray hair cut short, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She gestured for him to sit. Thank you for coming, Ethan. This shouldn't take long. She folded her hands on her desk. I wanted to touch base about appropriate professional boundaries. His mouth went dry. Okay. We've received some informal concerns, nothing official, about potential relationships between employees at different levels of the organization. She watched his face carefully. I want to be clear that Sterling Systems takes these matters seriously. Even the appearance of impropriety can create uncomfortable situations. I understand. Have you had any interactions with senior leadership outside of normal work contexts? The question hung there. He could lie. But lying to HR was grounds for termination. I've spoken with Miss Sterling a few times. Brief conversations. Nothing inappropriate. Outside of work, he hesitated a fraction too long. Once, she needed some advice on a personal matter, unrelated to work. Margaret's expression didn't change, but he saw her make a note. I see. In these conversations, would you characterize them as professional? Yes. She studied him for a long moment. Ethan, I'm not accusing you of anything, but I need you to understand that perception matters. If other employees believe there's favoritism or special treatment, it creates problems for everyone, including you and Ms. Sterling. There's no favoritism. I'm glad to hear it. She set down her pen. Consider this a friendly heads up. Be mindful of appearances. Keep interactions professional and transparent. If there's any situation that could be misinterpreted, avoid it. He left her office feeling sick. Someone had noticed. Someone had said something. The careful distance he and Diana had maintained clearly wasn't careful enough. That evening, he called her. She picked up on the second ring. HR called me in today. He didn't bother with preamble. They're asking questions. Her sharp intake of breath told him she'd feared this. What did they ask? He told her. When he finished, there was a long silence. Someone's watching us. Her voice was tight. Someone noticed and reported it. Margaret said it was informal concerns, not an official complaint. Yet, Diana let out a frustrated breath. Ethan, I'm sorry. I should have known this would happen. You didn't do anything wrong. We didn't do anything wrong. It doesn't matter. The appearance is enough. He heard her moving, probably pacing. Maybe we need to stop, at least until after the acquisition closes. Once that's done and I'm no longer... She didn't finish. No longer what? It's nothing. Forget I said that. Diana, I'm just thinking out loud. Look, we need to be more careful. Maybe take a break from meeting outside work. Give things time to settle. His chest tightened. Is that what you want? No. Her voice cracked slightly. But I don't want you losing your job because of me. And I don't want you under investigation because of me. They both fell silent, the weight of the situation pressing down through the phone line. Let's just be smart, Diana finally said. No meetings for a couple weeks. Let HR move on to other concerns, then we'll reassess. Okay. The word felt like giving up. This isn't over, Ethan. Just paused. I know. After they hung up, he sat in his apartment, staring at nothing. The coffee mug she'd used still sat on his counter unwashed. He'd kept it there like a talisman. Now it just looked sad. Monday morning arrived with an email that made his blood run cold. Sent at 7:15 a.m. before most people were even awake. From Richard Bennett, board member, to board of directors. Diana Sterling, CC, Senior Leadership Team. Subject, Emergency Board Session. Leadership Review, Board Members. Recent developments require immediate discussion regarding leadership stability and decision-making processes during the Cascade Equity acquisition. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for Wednesday, 8 o'clock a.m. Attendance mandatory. We need to address concerns that have been raised and ensure we're positioned for the best possible outcome. Regards, Richard Bennett. Ethan stared at the email. He'd been CC'd because it went to senior leadership, which included VPSS and above. But seeing Diana's name in the TO line made his stomach churn. Leadership stability was code. Concerns that have been raised was a code. This wasn't about the acquisition. This was about Diana. His phone buzzed. A text from Diana. They're trying to force me out. He replied immediately. What do we do? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Appeared again. Finally, I don't know, but I need you to trust me. I do. Wednesday could change everything. If the board votes against me, if they push me out before the acquisition closes, the text trailed off. Then we'll figure it out. Ethan. Her next message came through slowly, like she was choosing every word. There's something I haven't told you about why this acquisition matters, about what I'm considering. His heart started to pound. What do you mean? Not over text. Can you meet me tonight? I know we said we'd take a break, but this is important. He didn't hesitate. Where was? My place. 8 p.m. Parking house garage level 3. I'll meet you there. The rest of the day crawled by. He couldn't focus, couldn't think about anything except that emergency board meeting and whatever Diana needed to tell him. At 7:30, he left work and drove downtown to her building. The parking garage was nearly empty at this hour. He found a spot on level 3 and texted her, I'm here. A minute later, the elevator doors opened and she stepped out. She wasn't wearing her usual work armor, just jeans and a sweater, hair down. She looked younger like this, more vulnerable. Hi. She walked toward him. Hi. They stood there beside his car for a moment, neither quite sure how to start. The board meeting Wednesday, Diana's voice was steady, but he could hear the tension underneath. Richard Bennett is pushing for my removal. On what grounds? Officially, he'll claim I'm too emotionally invested in the acquisition to make rational decisions, that I'm protecting employees at the expense of shareholder value. She crossed her arms. Unofficially, he thinks I'm a liability, and he's probably heard the rumors about us. Ethan felt sick. This is my fault. No, she stepped closer. This is corporate politics. Richard's been angling for more control for years. The acquisition gave him an opening. She took a breath. But there's something else, something I've been thinking about for weeks. What if I accept Cascade's offer, I transition out as CEO within 90 days? They're bringing in their own leadership team. She watched his face carefully. I could fight it, try to negotiate to stay on, but honestly, I'm not sure I want to. He stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. For 15 years, I've defined myself by this job, CEO of Sterling Systems. It's who I am, or who I thought I was. Her eyes held his. But that night I knocked on your door, I realized I'm not just a title. I'm a person who's been so focused on building a company that I forgot to build a life. Diana. Let me finish. Her voice was gentle but firm. If I step down after the acquisition closes, I could start fresh. A consulting firm, smaller clients, work-life balance. Time for, she trailed off, the implication clear, time for things that matter. His heart was hammering now. You're thinking about leaving. I'm thinking about choosing, she corrected, about what kind of life I want to have. And that life includes you if you'll have me. But I need to know if I do this, if I make this choice, are you in? Or am I risking everything for something that might not work? The question hung between them in the concrete stillness of the parking garage. Ethan could hear his own breathing, could feel the weight of what she was asking. She was offering to walk away from everything she'd built, and she needed to know he wouldn't disappear when she did. I'm in. The words came out firm, certain. I'm scared as hell, but I'm in. Relief flooded her face. She closed the distance between them and kissed him quick and desperate, and full of 3 weeks of restraint. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Wednesday's board meeting. She pressed her forehead to his. It might get ugly. Richard might force a vote. I need you to know that whatever happens, I'm making my choice for me. Not for you. I would never put that on you. I know. But you made me see that there's another way to live, a better way. Her hands came up to frame his face. So thank you for knocking something loose in me. They stood there for a short moment holding each other in the dim garage light, both of them knowing that Wednesday would change everything. Wednesday morning arrived with the weight of an execution. Ethan sat at his desk pretending to work, while the clock inched toward 8. Every minute felt like an hour. Somewhere upstairs, Diana was walking into a boardroom where people would decide her fate. He couldn't be there. Couldn't do anything except wait and wonder if the foundation they'd started building was about to collapse before they'd even tested its strength. His phone stayed silent. 9 o'clock came and went. 9:30, 10, nothing. Tom rolled past with fresh coffee, noticed Ethan staring at his blank screen. You're not even pretending anymore. What's going on? Board meeting this morning, emergency session about the acquisition. Yeah, I saw that email. Think they'll take the deal. Ethan had no answer that wouldn't reveal too much. Probably. At 10:45, his phone finally buzzed. A text from Diana, just 2 words, it's done. His fingers moved fast. Are you okay? The response took longer this time, long enough that he started imagining worst-case scenarios. Then can you come to my place tonight, same as last time? I need to see you. What time? 8, and Ethan, bring an overnight bag. I don't want you driving home late. The implications settled over him like a warm weight. This was crossing a threshold they'd been careful about, but something in her message suggested she was past being careful. I'll be there. The afternoon stretched impossibly long. He went through motions of productivity while his mind spun scenarios. At 5:30, he left the office, drove home to his apartment, threw clothes into a duffel bag. Toothbrush, clean shirt. The acts felt both mundane and monumental. He was packing to spend the night at Diana Sterling's penthouse. 3 weeks ago, that sentence would have been absurd. Traffic downtown was thick with rush hour. He parked in the same garage, same level 3 spot. This time when the elevator opened, Diana was already standing there waiting. She looked wrung out, mascara slightly smudged, hair loose and tangled, like she'd been running her hands through it. The professional armor was completely gone. She walked straight into his arms without a word. He held her, feeling her shake slightly, feeling the careful control she'd maintained finally starting to crack. Come upstairs. Her voice was muffled against his chest. They rode the elevator in silence. Her penthouse occupied the entire top floor, exactly as sterile and perfect as she'd described. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city lights. Modern furniture that looked expensive and uncomfortable. Art on the walls that probably cost more than his car. Everything pristine and cold and utterly empty of personality. Diana dropped her keys on the entry table and walked straight to the kitchen. She pulled out a bottle of wine, poured 2 glasses without asking if he wanted any. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed him one. They accepted Cascade's offer. She took a long drink. Vote was 4-1. Richard was the only dissent, and only because he wanted harder terms. That's good, right? The company's secure. The company's secure. She repeated it like the words tasted strange. Employees keep their jobs. Stock options pay out. Everyone wins. Another drink deeper this time. Except Cascade's bringing their own CEO. I transition out over 90 days, help with the handoff, then I'm done. Ethan set his glass down and reached for her hands. How do you feel about that? Terrified. The admission came out in a rush. I've been CEO for 15 years. I built that company from 30 employees to 250. Every decision, every strategy, every success, it's all tied to me. And now I'm supposed to just let go, hand it to someone else and walk away. You don't have to walk away from everything. You talked about starting your own consulting firm. That's the plan. Sterling Strategy Group. Small office, handful of clients, work I choose instead of work that chooses me. Her green eyes met his. I signed the paperwork this afternoon. Lease on an office space downtown. Filed the business registration. It's real. He pulled her closer. Then why do you look like you're about to break? That's when the tears finally came. Not the controlled emotion from that first morning in his apartment, but real sobbing, the kind that came from somewhere deep and frightened. He guided her to the couch and held her while she cried into his shoulder, her whole body shaking with it. What if I'm nothing without that title? The words came out broken. What if I spent 15 years becoming Diana Sterling, 18 EO, and I don't know how to just be Diana? What if I stepped down and realized I gave up the only thing that made me matter? That's not true. He kept his voice low and steady. You mattered before you became CEO. You'll matter after. Will I? She pulled back to look at him, mascara streaking her face. Or will it just be another failed executive who couldn't handle the pressure? Another woman who proved she couldn't have it all? The fear in her voice was raw and real. This wasn't the ice queen everyone at Sterling Systems whispered about. This was someone standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at a future she couldn't see clearly. Listen to me. He wiped tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. You're not failing. You're choosing. There's a difference between giving up and letting go. Giving up is surrender. Letting go is strength. She closed her eyes and leaned into his touch. I'm so tired, Ethan. Tired of being strong all the time. Tired of making decisions that affect hundreds of lives. Tired of going home to this. She gestured at the perfect empty penthouse. This beautiful prison where I'm completely alone. You're not alone right now. Her eyes opened, locking onto his. No, I'm not. She shifted closer, closing what little distance remained between them. What if I make this choice, leave the company, start over, and then we don't work out? What if I'm throwing away everything I built for something that falls apart in 6 months? I can't promise we'll last forever. Honesty felt more important than comfort. Nobody can promise that, but I can promise I'll show up every day and try. I won't run when things get hard. I won't decide you're too much or too complicated or too anything. How can you be so sure? Because I've spent 3 years playing it safe, and I was miserable. You make me want to stop playing it safe. That's worth the risk. Diana studied his face for a long moment, searching for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her, because she leaned in and kissed him. Soft at first, tentative, giving him space to pull back. He didn't. Instead, he deepened the kiss, one hand moving to her hair, the other pulling her closer. She made a small sound against his mouth, something between relief and surrender. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. I don't want to rush this. We've been taking it slow for 3 weeks. We've talked and had coffee and built trust. His voice came out rough. I think we've earned the right to stop holding back. You brought an overnight bag. It wasn't a question. You told me to. She smiled, then real and unguarded. I did, didn't I? She stood and held out her hand. Come on. He let her lead him through the penthouse to her bedroom. It was as minimalist as the rest of the Space King bed, with white linens, more floor-to-ceiling windows, a single piece of abstract art above the headboard. But when she turned to face him in the dim light, none of the surroundings mattered. Last chance to change your mind. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm not changing my mind. She pulled him down into another kiss, slower this time, but no less intense. His hands found the hem of her sweater, and she helped him pull it over her head. Her fingers worked at the buttons of his shirt. Clothes fell away piece by piece until there was nothing left between them, except skin and breath, and the 3 weeks of wanting they'd been carefully keeping at bay. They moved together onto the bed, bodies fitting like they'd been designed for exactly this. Every touch felt like discovery and recognition at once. She was beautiful and complicated and real under his hands, and when she pulled him closer and whispered his name, it sounded like both prayer and victory. Later, much later, they lay tangled in sheets, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. The city lights painted shifting shadows across the ceiling. Neither spoke for a long time, both caught in the quiet aftermath of a threshold finally crossed. I'm glad you stayed. Diana's voice was soft, drowsy. Where else would I be? Playing it safe in your apartment, pretending this isn't happening. I'm done pretending. He pressed a kiss to her hair. We're in this now. Whatever comes next, we handle it together. She lifted her head to look at him, eyes serious. Friday morning, I have to announce the transition plan to the company. Everyone's going to know I'm stepping down. There will be questions, speculation. Some people will assume it's because of the acquisition. Others will dig deeper. Let them dig. We're not doing anything wrong. Not everyone will see it that way. She traced a finger along his collarbone. Cassandra Wells has been circling like a shark. She wants my bar or at least a bigger piece of the pie. If she can use us to discredit me, she will. Then we stay professional at work until you're officially transitioned out. After that, we're just two people. No power imbalance, no conflict of interest. Diana nodded slowly. 90 days. I can do 90 days. We both can. She settled back against his chest, breathing slowly, evening out. Within minutes, she was asleep, her body finally relaxing after what must have been an impossibly stressful day. Ethan stayed awake longer, staring at the ceiling, holding her close, wondering how his carefully ordered life had transformed so completely in less than a month. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. He reached for it carefully, trying not to wake Diana. A text from his father. Haven't heard from you in a few days. Everything okay? Guilt hit him. He'd been so consumed with Diana and the acquisition and navigating this impossible situation that he'd forgotten his weekly Saturday visit. He typed back quietly, "Sorry, Dad, work's been crazy. Can I come by tomorrow morning?" The response came fast. "Course. I'll be in the workshop." Ethan set the phone down and pulled Diana closer. Tomorrow he'd go to Ballard and tell his father everything. Frank deserved to know what was happening. And honestly, Ethan needed his father's wisdom right now more than ever. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold. Diana woke first, spent a moment looking disoriented, then smiled when she saw him. They showered together, intimate and unhurried, then made coffee in her sterile kitchen while wrapped in bathrobes. "I have meetings all day." She leaned against the counter, mug in both hands. "Lawyers, accountants, Cascade's transition team. It's going to be brutal. And tomorrow's the announcement. 10 a.m., all hands." She took a sip of coffee. "After that, everything changes. The 90-day countdown starts. You'll be great. You always are." She smiled at him over the rim of her mug. "Stay tonight, too. If you want me to, I want you to." They finished coffee and got dressed in companionable silence. Ethan grabbed his duffel bag and they rode the elevator down together. In the parking garage, they kissed once more before separating to their respective cars. The normalcy of it, the domesticity, felt both strange and right. Ethan drove straight from downtown to Ballard, arriving at his father's house just after 8. Frank was already in the workshop wearing his old carpenter's apron, working on what looked like a jewelry box. Intricate inlay pattern on the lid. His hands moved with practiced precision, despite the arthritis. "That's beautiful." Ethan stopped in the doorway to admire it. Frank looked up, grinning. "Project for Mrs. Patterson next door. Her 50th anniversary is coming up." He set down his tools. "You look like you haven't slept in a week. Coffee." They went inside to the kitchen. Frank poured from a pot that had probably been sitting since 6 a.m., strong enough to strip paint. They sat at the small dining table where Ethan had eaten breakfast every morning of his childhood. "So," his father studied him with those sharp eyes that never missed anything. "You gonna tell me what's going on, or do I have to guess?" Remember Diana? The woman I mentioned a few weeks ago, the one who showed up at your door at 5 in the morning. Hard to forget. Ethan took a breath and told him everything. The coffee shop meetings, the acquisition, the board meeting yesterday, the fact that Diana was leaving Sterling Systems to start fresh. And though he kept the details vague, the fact that they'd crossed a line last night. Frank listened without interrupting, occasionally sipping his terrible coffee. When Ethan finished, his father was quiet for a long moment. "You love her?" Not a question. Ethan stopped. The word felt too big, too fast. "I don't know yet. Maybe. Probably. It's only been a few weeks. Time doesn't matter much when you know." Frank leaned back in his chair. "I knew I loved your mother after 2 weeks. Took me another month to work up the nerve to tell her, but I knew." "How did you know?" "Because every decision I made, I started asking myself what she'd think. Because when good things happened, she was the first person I wanted to tell. Because the idea of losing her felt worse than any risk involved in keeping her. Frank's weathered hands wrapped around his mug. Does that sound familiar? It did, uncomfortably so. Dad, I'm scared I'm moving too fast, that I'm throwing away stability for something that might not last. You want to know what I think? Frank didn't wait for an answer. I think you've been living half a life since Sarah left. Playing it safe, keeping your head down, not wanting to get hurt again. Safe is fine for a while, but eventually safe becomes a different kind of prison. The words hit hard. Ethan stared into his coffee cup. Your mother died when you were 22. His father's voice roughened. I worked so much after that. Stayed busy building houses and taking extra shifts because if I stopped moving, I had to feel the loss. You know what I regret most? What? That I didn't slow down earlier. Didn't spend more time with her when I had the chance. Didn't say the things I should have said. Frank reached across the table and gripped Ethan's hand. Son, I'm 67 years old. I've got arthritis in my hands and my heart's not what it used to be. Doctor says I might have a year, might have 10, don't know. But I do know this, if you found something worth fighting for, you fight. You don't wait for the perfect moment or the safe bet. You take the leap. Ethan felt his throat tighten. What if I'm not enough for her? What if she realizes she gave up everything and I'm just what? Just a good man who shows up and does what he says. Just someone steady and honest. Frank squeezed his hand harder. Your mother didn't marry me because I was rich or important. She married me because I made her feel safe. Not safe like nothing bad would happen, but safe like she could be herself and I'd still be there. You do that for Diana. I try. Then you're enough. Frank let go and sat back. Now stop second-guessing yourself and go be with her. And bring her around sometime so I can meet this woman who's got you all twisted up. Ethan managed a smile despite the emotion choking him. I will. Soon. They finished coffee and Ethan helped his father in the workshop for a couple hours, losing himself in the familiar rhythm of sanding and fitting pieces together. By the time he left, the tightness in his chest had eased. His father's words echoed in his head during the drive back downtown. If you found something worth fighting for, you fight. He showed up at Diana's penthouse that evening with takeout Thai food and a bottle of wine. She answered the door in yoga pants, in an oversized sweater, hair piled on top of her head, no makeup. The most casual he'd ever seen her. You're a lifesaver. She grabbed the food bags. I've been in meetings since 8 this morning. I'm starving. They ate on her couch with the city lights spread out below them. She told him about the endless details of the transition contracts to review teams to brief systems to document. Everything she'd built had to be packaged up and handed over to someone else. Marcus Wright is taking over as CEO. She speared a piece of pad thai. He's been our CFO for 6 years. Good guy, smart. The company will be in decent hands. How do you feel about that? Relieved, honestly. If it had to be someone, Marcus is the right choice. He actually cares about the employees. She set her plate down. Cassandra lobbied hard for the position, but the board shot her down. She's not happy. She's going to be a problem. Probably, but in 90 days she won't be my problem anymore. Diana leaned back against the couch. God, that feels strange to say. In 90 days I won't be anyone's boss. I'll just be me. Scary, terrifying, and exhilarating in equal measure. She turned to look at him. I filed all the paperwork for Sterling Strategy Group. Found office space in a building on 5th Avenue. 2 rooms, small but nice. I can move in December 1st. That's fast. I don't want to wait. The longer I sit around after leaving Sterling Systems, the more I'll second-guess everything. She reached for his hand. I want to start building the next chapter. They spent the rest of the evening talking through her plans. The kind of consulting she wanted to do, helping smaller companies with strategic planning, mergers, market positioning. Work that made a difference without consuming her entire life. She showed him photos of the office space on her phone, already envisioning where furniture would go. You could work from there too. The suggestion came casual, but her eyes were hopeful. If you wanted, there's a second office. Could be perfect for Brooks Analytics. The name made him smile. I haven't officially launched Brooks Analytics yet. But you're thinking about it. You said you wanted more flexibility. He had been thinking about it, about going freelance, choosing his own projects, setting his own hours. The stability of Sterling Systems had felt necessary after Sarah left, but maybe he'd outgrown that need. Let me see how everything shakes out after the acquisition. He squeezed her hand. But yeah, I'm thinking about it. She pulled him in for a kiss, soft and sweet. We're going to build something good together. I can feel it. They went to bed early, exhaustion catching up with both of them. But unlike the previous night's urgent intensity, this felt different, quieter. They made love slowly, taking time to learn each other, and afterward lay wrapped together, talking in low voices until sleep claimed them. Friday morning arrived heavy with anticipation. Diana left early for pre-meeting, prep kissing Ethan goodbye while he was still half asleep. When he got to the office an hour later, the energy was different. People clustered in hallways whispering. Speculation ran wild about what the all-hands meeting would cover. Tom cornered him in the break room. You hear anything? Someone said Diana's stepping down. Where'd you hear that? Cassandra mentioned it to the product team yesterday, said there would be big leadership changes. Ethan kept his face neutral. Guess we'll find out at 10. The conference room was packed by 9:50, standing room only. Ethan found his usual spot against the back wall where he could see everything. The air felt charged, anxious. People clutched their phones like lifelines. At exactly 10 o'clock, the front door opened. Diana walked in wearing a charcoal suit, hair perfect, every inch the CEO. But Ethan could see the slight tension in her shoulders, the way she gripped her notes just a fraction too tight. She stepped up to the podium and the room fell silent. Thank you all for coming. I'll keep this brief because I know everyone has questions. Her voice carried clearly calm and professional. Earlier this week, the board voted to accept Cascade Equity's acquisition offer. As of this morning, the deal is officially in motion. Closing is scheduled for January 15th. Applause broke out, a relief washing through the room. People had been worried about their jobs for weeks. This meant security. Diana waited for the applause to die down. The terms include strong protections for all current employees. Your position's benefits and stock options remain intact. Cascade is committed to maintaining our culture and our brand. More applause, though more subdued this time. Everyone sensing there was more coming. However, Diana paused and the room went completely still. Part of the transition involves bringing in new senior leadership. Cascade will install their own executive team over the next 90 days. Marcus Wright, our current CFO, will be promoted to CEO. He'll work closely with Cascade's team to ensure a smooth handover. Silence. Then someone in the front row spoke up. What about you? Diana's expression didn't change, but Ethan saw her take a breath. After a 90-day transition period, I'll be stepping down from Sterling Systems. This company has been my life for 15 years. I'm incredibly proud of what we've built together. But it's time for me to start a new chapter. The room erupted. Some people looked shocked. Others nodded like they'd suspected. A few looked genuinely upset. Ethan watched Diana handle question after question with grace and honesty. She explained her decision, emphasized that it was her choice, announced her plans for Sterling's strategy group. Throughout it all, she projected calm confidence. But when her eyes swept across the crowd and caught his for just a second, he saw the vulnerability underneath. The fear that people would judge her, that they'd think she was running away instead of running towards something new. The meeting lasted 40 minutes. When it finally ended, people surged forward to talk to her. Ethan hung back, letting others have their moment. Eventually, the crowd thinned, and Diana caught his eye across the room. She gave him a small smile, private just for him, then turned back to the remaining employees. He slipped out into the hallway. His phone buzzed. Text from Tom. Holy shit, did you know about this? He replied, found out this week, pretty big news. Drinks tonight. We need to process this. Murphy's at 6. Ethan hesitated, then agreed. Normal routine felt important right now. See you there. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of speculation and gossip. People stopped by his desk asking if he'd heard anything, if he knew why Diana was really leaving, if the company was actually stable, or if this was the beginning of layoffs. He deflected as best he could, giving non-answers that satisfied no one. At 5:30, he packed up and headed to Murphy's Pub, the dive bar 3 blocks from the office where he and Tom and a couple other guys met most Fridays. The place was dark and comfortable, worn booths and sports on every TV, the kind of bar where you could drink in peace without anyone bothering you. Tom was already there at their usual booth, along with Mike from warehouse operations and Greg from IT. They were deep in conversation about the announcement. "I'm telling you, she got pushed out," Mike was saying as Ethan slid into the booth. "No way she leaves voluntarily when an acquisition's happening. Maybe she's just tired." Greg shrugged. "Being CEO is brutal." Tom looked up as Ethan sat. "There he is. You were in the meeting. What do you think?" "I think she meant what she said. She wants to do something different." "But why now? Why not wait until after the transition?" Ethan signaled the waitress for a beer. "Maybe that's exactly why now. Gets out before Cascade changes everything." They debated it back and forth while Ethan mostly listened, nursing his beer and picking at a basket of wings. The conversation moved to other topics. Sports weekend plans, a mutual friend's upcoming wedding. Normal guy talk that usually felt comfortable. Tonight it just felt like killing time until he could leave and go back to Diana. He was about to excuse himself when someone approached their booth. A woman. It took him a second to recognize her because he wasn't expecting to see her here, wasn't expecting to see her anywhere. Sarah, his ex-wife, stood there looking exactly like he remembered. Dark hair, sharp eyes, designer clothes that probably cost more than his rent. She'd always been beautiful in that polished, ambitious way. Right now she was smiling at him like the past 3 years hadn't happened. "Ethan, I thought that was you." The table went quiet. Tom and Mike and Greg all suddenly found their beers incredibly fascinating. "Sarah," he couldn't keep the surprise out of his voice. "What are you doing here?" "Meeting a client nearby. Saw you through the window." She gestured at the booth. "Can we talk?" Just for a minute. Every instinct screamed that this was a bad idea, but he couldn't think of a graceful way to say no without causing a scene. He slid out of the booth. "Yeah, okay." They moved to a quieter corner near the back, away from his friend's curious stares. Sarah leaned against the wall, studying him with that intense focus she'd always had. "You look good." Her voice was softer than he remembered. Different, more settled. "It's been 3 years." "I know, She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. "I saw an article online about your company's acquisition. Sterling Systems, right? The piece mentioned the CEO stepping down. Diana Sterling. It described her as a brilliant strategist who built the company from nothing." Ethan's guard went up immediately. "Yeah, she announced it today." The article also mentioned she'd been seen with a junior employee recently. Speculation about the reason for her departure. Sarah's eyes held his. "Was that employee you—" He wanted to lie, wanted to tell her it was none of her business. Instead, he just said, "Why are you here, Sarah?" "Because I made a mistake." The words came out fast, like she'd been practicing them. "3 years ago when I left, I was wrong about you." His stomach dropped. "Sarah, just let me finish." She held up a hand. "I've been dating the kind of men I thought I wanted. Ambitious, driven, successful. They're all assholes, Ethan. Every single one. They care more about their portfolios than people. They treat relationships like business deals. I'm sorry you had bad experiences, but you were the good one." Her voice cracked slightly. "You were steady and honest, and you showed up. I called that average. I called that settling. I was an idiot." Ethan stared at her, completely blindsided. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want another chance. I want to try again." She stepped closer, and he instinctively stepped back. "We were good together before I messed it up. We could be good again. No pressure this time. You can be exactly who you are." The offer hung in the air between them. 3 years ago, he would have taken it without thinking, would have been grateful for the second chance, would have done anything to prove he could be enough for her. Now it just felt hollow. "I'm with someone." The words came out firm, certain. Sarah's expression tightened. "The CEO, Diana Sterling." "Yeah." "Ethan, think about this. She's leaving her job, her company, everything she built. How long until she resents you for that? How long until she realizes what she gave up and blames you?" The words were designed to hit where it hurt, and they did. His deepest fear spoken out loud. I didn't ask her to give up anything. She's making her own choices. Is she? Or is she making choices because of you? Sarah moved closer again. I know how this ends. You'll never feel like you're enough for her. She'll never stop being the CEO even after she leaves. And eventually it'll fall apart and you'll be right back where you were 3 years ago. Except worse. You're wrong. She reached out and touched his arm. Come back to me. We know each other. We understand each other. It'll be easier. Better. He looked down at her hand on his arm, then back up at her face. 3 years ago, she'd walked away because he wasn't ambitious enough, wasn't impressive enough, wasn't enough. Now she was back because her ambitious men had disappointed her and she wanted safe. No. Ethan, I'm not your backup plan, Sarah. I'm not the comfortable option you settle for when exciting doesn't work out. He gently removed her hand from his arm. You were right 3 years ago. We wanted different things. We still do. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. He took a breath. I hope you find what you're looking for. I really do. But you're not going to find it with me. He walked away before she could respond, heading back to the booth where his friends pretended they hadn't been watching the entire conversation. Tom raised his eyebrows in question. Ex-wife. Ethan threw cash on the table to cover his tab. I need to go. Are you okay? Yeah, better than okay. He grabbed his jacket. See you Monday. Outside, the air was cold and rain threatened. Ethan pulled out his phone and called Diana. She answered on the second ring. Hey, how are you holding up after this morning? I'm good. Tired but good. How was drinks with the guys? Sarah showed up. Silence on the other end. Then, your ex, yeah. She wanted to get back together. Another pause longer this time. What did you say? I said no, then I left. He walked toward where his car was parked. I'm coming to your place, if that's still okay. It's more than okay. Her voice was thick with emotion. Ethan, I don't want easy. I don't want comfortable. I want you. Complicated, scary, absolutely worth it you. He heard her breath catch. How fast can you get here? 20 minutes. I'll be waiting. He drove through downtown Seattle faster than was probably legal rain starting to splatter his windshield. His mind kept replaying Sarah's words. How long until Diana resents you, until she realizes what she gave up? But underneath that was his father's voice. If you've found something worth fighting for, you fight. He parked in the garage and took the elevator straight up. Diana opened her penthouse door before he could knock, like she'd been standing there waiting. She was still in her work clothes, suit jacket, discarded blouse untucked. She tried to tell me we wouldn't work. The words rushed out of him. That you'd resent me for leaving Sterling Systems. That I'd never feel like enough. Diana reached for him, pulling him inside and closing the door. What did you say? I said she was wrong. He framed her face with his hands. I told her I was with you. Are you? Her voice was barely a whisper. With me. Yeah, I am, if you'll have me. She kissed him, then hard and desperate, 3 weeks of uncertainty finally crystallizing into certainty. He backed her against the door, hands tangling in her hair, and she wrapped her legs around his waist. They barely made it to the bedroom. This time there was no hesitation, no careful restraint. They crashed together with the intensity of a dam finally breaking. She pulled his shirt over his head while he worked at her buttons. Clothes scattered across the floor in a trail leading to the bed. When they finally fell onto the mattress together, skin against skin, it felt like inevitability and choice in equal measure. I love you. The words escaped him without planning, torn out by the moment, and the feeling, and the absolute certainty of it. I know it's fast and probably crazy, but I love you. Diana went still beneath him, eyes wide. For a second, he thought he had ruined everything. Then she pulled him down into a kiss that felt like an answer, and when they broke apart, she was crying. I love you too. She laughed through the tears. God, I love you too. They made love with those words hanging in the air between them, repeated like vows, and afterward lay tangled together while rain hammered the windows. Diana pressed against his side head on his chest, fingers tracing patterns over his heart. That was real, right? Her voice was soft, almost uncertain. You meant it, every word. Even though we've only known each other a month. My dad knew he loved my mom after 2 weeks, took him another month to say it. Ethan pressed a kiss to her hair. Time doesn't matter when you know. She shifted to look up at him, eyes serious. The 90 days are going to be hard. We'll have to hide this at work. Pretend we're just CEO and employee. People like Cassandra are going to watch for any sign of weakness. We can do 90 days. And after, when I'm not your boss anymore, then we stop hiding. He pulled her closer. Then we figure out what our life looks like together. She smiled against his chest. Our life, I like the sound of that. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time in years, Ethan didn't dream about failure or inadequacy or not being enough. He dreamed about building something solid and real, about a workshop full of good wood, about his father's voice saying, "You take the leap." Morning arrived too early. Diana's phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling them both from sleep. She reached for it groggily, then went rigid. What's wrong? Ethan pushed up on one elbow. She stared at the screen, face draining of color. It's from Richard Bennett, the board member. What does it say? Diana's hand shook slightly as she read aloud. Diana Cascade is concerned about media speculation regarding your departure. Need to discuss communication strategy. Emergency call scheduled for Monday morning 8 a.m. Your attendance critical. She set the phone down carefully like it might explode. Speculation. That means someone's been talking to journalists. Someone's been feeding them the story about us. Ethan's stomach turned to ice. Cassandra. Probably. She's been looking for leverage to undermine me. Diana pressed her hands to her face. If this gets out publicly, if the media starts running stories about the CEO having an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate, it won't matter that we didn't do anything wrong while I was your boss. The damage will be done. What do we do? She dropped her hands and looked at him, fear and determination warring in her expression. We stick to the plan. 90 days of professional distance at work. No slip-ups, no private meetings, nothing anyone can point to. After that, she took a shaky breath. After that, we deal with whatever comes. And if it all falls apart, then we fall apart together. She reached for his hand, gripping it tight. But we don't give up without a fight. Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her against his chest while morning light filtered through the windows and rain continued its steady percussion against the glass. Somewhere out there, people were already sharpening knives. Somewhere out there, the next 90 days waited to test exactly how much they were willing to risk for each other. But right now, in this moment, they had each other. And that would have to be enough. Monday morning's emergency call happened in Diana's office with the door closed. Ethan watched from his desk as board members filed in. Richard Bennett, with his permanent scowl, Susan Mitchell looking concerned, Marcus Wright, who'd be taking over as CEO. Through the glass walls, he could see Diana's posture straight-backed and composed, nodding at whatever was being said. The meeting lasted 2 hours. When everyone finally left, Diana stayed at her desk. She didn't look up, didn't acknowledge the curious stares from employees wondering what that was about. Ethan forced himself to focus on his screen, to not give anyone reason to connect them. His phone buzzed an hour later. Text from Diana handled. For now, they wanted assurance that any speculation wouldn't damage the acquisition. I gave it to them. He replied, what does that mean? It means we're even more careful than we planned. No contact at work beyond what's absolutely necessary. I'll text you tonight. The next week settled into a strange rhythm. At Sterling Systems, Diana and Ethan were ghosts to each other. They passed in hallways without acknowledgement. In meetings where she spoke and he attended, their eyes never met. To any observer, they were nothing more than CEO and data analysts counting down to a transition. But nights were different. Ethan would leave work at 5:30, drive to his apartment, change clothes, then head to Diana's penthouse. Sometimes she cooked badly, but with enthusiasm. Sometimes they ordered takeout. They'd eat on her couch, talking about their days, about the endless details of transition planning, about the consulting firm she was building piece by piece. Marcus is solid. Diana kicked off her heels and curled against Ethan's side. He's scared, but he'll be fine. Cascade's integration team is actually pretty reasonable. How much longer until you're officially out? 63 days. She'd been counting. 63 days until I can walk into Sterling Systems and not be anyone's boss. 63 days until we can stop pretending. You're not sleeping at your own apartment anymore. The observation came quiet. She lifted her head to look at him. Is that a problem? No, just noticing. My toothbrush has been here for 2 weeks. My clothes are in your closet. We're basically living together and we've been dating a month and a half. Too fast. Ethan considered it. Everything about them had been fast. 5 a.m. knock on his door to I love you in under 4 weeks. By conventional wisdom, they should be taking things slower. But conventional wisdom hadn't accounted for the way she fit against his side, or the way coming to this penthouse felt more like coming home than his own apartment ever had. No, it's not too fast. It's just us. She smiled and kissed him. Good, because I like having you here. At work, the transition ground forward. Diana handed off major accounts to Marcus, walked him through strategic decisions, introduced him to key clients. Cascade's people observed everything, taking notes, asking questions. The company that had been Diana's for 15 years was slowly becoming someone else's. Tom pulled Ethan aside one afternoon in early November. You notice how quiet Diana's been? She used to at least say good morning in the elevator. Now she's like a statue. She's probably stressed with the transition. Yeah, but it's weird. She's just gone, like she already left. Tom lowered his voice. Cassandra's been making moves, positioning herself with the new regime. Marcus might be CEO, but Cassandra wants to run product development independently, basically her own kingdom. That's between them. You really don't care about any of this, Tom studied him. It's like you checked out. You do your work, but that's it. No interest in the politics. Because the politics didn't matter anymore. In 60 days, Ethan planned to give his notice and launch Brooks Analytics for real. He'd already been building a client list, quietly small companies that needed data analysis but couldn't afford full-time staff. 3 clients, so far enough to make freelancing viable. Just keeping my head down until things settle. Tom didn't look convinced but let it drop. Thanksgiving arrived. Diana flew to Oregon to see her mother first time in 2 years. Ethan spent the day in Ballard with Frank helping cook a turkey that turned out dry but edible. They ate at the small dining board and Frank asked about Diana. She's good, busy with the transition. You bringing her around for Christmas? If she wants to come, her mom might want her in Oregon. Frank set down his fork. You're living with her. It wasn't a question. Ethan had gotten sloppy about covering his tracks coming straight from downtown instead of his apartment, smelling like her perfume the way he checked his phone constantly. Yeah, basically. You happy? Really happy. Then I'm happy. Frank reached across the table and squeezed his son's hand. Your mother would have liked her, I can tell. Something in Ethan's chest loosened at that. Thanks, Dad. Just promise me something. Frank's grip tightened. When you're buddy and I think you're getting close, you do it right. None of this modern living together forever nonsense. You ask her properly. I will. Good. Frank released his hand and went back to the dry turkey. Now pass the cranberry sauce and tell me about this consulting business she's starting. December hit Seattle like a cold slap. Rain turned to sleet, then actual snow rare enough that the city ground to a halt for 3 days. Ethan and Diana were trapped in the penthouse, which should have felt claustrophobic, but somehow didn't. They worked from her dining table, her on transition documents, him on data analysis for his growing freelance practice. At lunch, they'd make sandwiches and eat standing at the windows watching snow blanket the city. I never took snow days. Diana pressed her forehead against the cold glass. Even in college, when everyone else was sledding or having snowball fights, I was in the library studying. Couldn't afford to waste time. We could go outside, build a snowman or something. She turned to look at him, eyes bright. Really? Why not world shut down anyway? They bundled up in coats and scarves and went down to the small park across from her building. The snow was perfect packing consistency. They built a lopsided snowman with stick, arms, and rocks for eyes, laughing like kids throwing snow at each other. Diana's cheeks turned pink from cold and exertion. She looked younger, lighter, like 15 years of CEO responsibility had been temporarily lifted. I can't remember the last time I just played. She brushed snow from her hair. This is good. This is really good. Standing in the snow with her, watching her smile, Ethan knew his father was right. He was getting close to ready. Diana's last day at Sterling Systems landed on December 20th, 3 days before Christmas. The company threw a farewell party in the main conference room at 4 p.m. cake and champagne speeches from board members and longtime employees. Marcus presented her with a framed photo of the original Sterling Systems office from 15 years ago, back when they'd had 30 employees and operated out of a converted warehouse. You built something extraordinary. Marcus's voice carried genuine emotion. This company exists because you refused to give up when everyone said it couldn't be done. We're going to honor that legacy. Diana gave a short speech, thanking everyone, voice steady, but eyes bright with unshed tears. She talked about the journey, the challenges, the victories. She thanked her team for their dedication and trust. And she reminded them that endings were also beginnings. I'm not disappearing, I'm just changing addresses. Sterling Strategy Group opens January 2nd, 3 blocks from here. You'll probably see me at the same coffee shops. Light laughter rippled through the room. This company is in excellent hands. Marcus will take it further than I ever could. And I'm excited to see what comes next for all of us. The applause was thunderous. People came up to hug her, to thank her, to wish her well. Ethan hung back against the wall watching. Their eyes met once across the crowded room, and something passed between them. Relief, anticipation, the knowledge that after today the clock stopped ticking. After today, they were just two people with no power imbalance, no corporate policy preventing them from being together. Most people filtered out by 6. Ethan helped clean up, throwing away paper plates and empty champagne bottles. Diana stood by the windows looking out at the Seattle skyline, already dark at this hour. When the last employee left, he walked over to stand beside her. How are you feelings? Like I just jumped off a cliff and I'm not sure if I'm flying or falling. She didn't look at him. They were still in the office, still technically maintaining distance. Ask me again tomorrow. I'll do that. She smiled slightly. You should go. I need to pack up a few last things from my office. You sure? Yeah, I'll see you tonight. He left her there, silhouetted against the windows, went down to the parking garage and drove home through rush hour traffic. His apartment looked exactly as he'd left it weeks ago, lived in, but not really inhabited. He grabbed a few more clothes, some books, his coffee maker that Diana had been complaining about not having. Loaded everything into his car. He'd officially give up the lease at the end of the month. No point paying rent on a place he never slept. When he got to Diana's building, he used the key she'd given him last week and rode up to the penthouse. She wasn't home yet. He unpacked his things, adding them to the growing collection of his belongings scattered through her space. Their space now. The door opened at 7:30. Diana walked in carrying a banker's box, the last remnants of her office. She set it down by the entry and just stood there for a moment, coat still on, staring at nothing. It's done. Her voice was barely audible. 15 years. Done. Ethan crossed to her and pulled her into his arms. She held on tight, face pressed against his neck, and he felt her shoulders shake. She wasn't crying, not quite, just shaking with the enormity of it. You're okay. I've got you. They stood there in the entryway while the city lights glittered through the windows and something fundamental shifted in the air around them. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were clear. No more hiding. She said it like an incantation. No more pretending we barely know each other. No more counting days. She kissed him, then deep and thorough, and he tasted relief and fear and hope all mixed together. When they broke apart, she was smiling. I'm unemployed. How does it feel? Terrifying, liberating, completely insane. She laughed. Ask me again in a month. I'm giving my notice next week, 2 weeks after that Brooks Analytics officially launches. Her eyes went wide. Really, you're doing it? We're doing it. Both of us. New chapter together. She pulled him in for another kiss, harder this time, and they barely made it to the bedroom. New Year's Eve they spent alone in the penthouse. No parties, no crowds, just the two of them watching the Space Needle fireworks from the floor-to-ceiling windows. When midnight hit and the city erupted in celebration, Diana turned to him. This is going to be a good year. I can feel it. Best one yet. They kissed in the new year, and when they pulled apart, she was smiling. January 2nd, I opened Sterling Strategy Group. Late January, you officially leave Sterling Systems and launch Brooks Analytics. We're really doing this. We really are. I'm still scared. Me too, but sometimes the best work requires the biggest risks. Someone wise taught me that. She laughed. Your dad, my dad. January 2nd arrived cold and bright. Diana woke early, nervous energy radiating off her in waves. She tried on 3 different outfits before settling on gray slacks and a cream blouse, professional but not stuffy. They had coffee and bagels standing at the kitchen counter, both too anxious to sit. What if nobody shows up? Diana set her mug down with shaking hands. What if I sent all those invitations and scheduled all those meetings and nobody actually wants to work with me? Then we'll figure it out. But that's not going to happen. Ethan pulled her close. You're brilliant, and everyone knows it. They'll show up. At 8:30, they drove downtown to the Fifth Avenue building where Diana had leased office space. Second-floor corner unit windows overlooking the street. When they walked in, Ethan was struck by how different it felt from Sterling Systems. Smaller, yes, but warmer. Diana had picked furniture that was comfortable instead of impressive soft leather chairs, a couch for informal meetings artwork that she'd actually chosen herself instead of letting an interior designer handle it. This feels like you. He ran his hand along the wooden desk. Not like some generic CEO office. That's what I was hoping for. She set down her briefcase and looked around, taking it all in. Sterling Strategy Group, it's real. Her first client meeting was at 10, a tech startup looking for help with their market positioning. Diana was nervous, but she channeled it into preparation, reviewing notes, practicing her pitch. When the client arrived, two 20-somethings with big ideas and no money, she was all business. Ethan stayed in the second office working on his own projects, but he could hear her voice through the wall, confident and knowledgeable. The meeting lasted 2 hours. When the clients left, Diana appeared in his doorway, grinning. They signed. 3-month contract. It's not huge money, but it's a start. That's amazing. One down, she leaned against the doorframe. Only about 50 more to go before I'd match my old salary. You'll get there. She did. Over the next weeks, clients trickled in. Small companies mostly, but good ones. She helped a food truck entrepreneur develop a growth strategy, advised a nonprofit on fundraising approaches, consulted with a mid-sized manufacturing firm on organizational structure. Every project was different. Every client had unique challenges, and Diana thrived on it. I forgot what this felt like, she told Ethan one evening over Chinese takeout in their living room. Actually helping people instead of just managing quarterly earnings, making a real difference for businesses that need it. Ethan had given his notice at Sterling Systems the second week of January. Tom had been shocked, Marcus had been disappointed, and Cassandra had smiled like she'd won something. His last day was January 26. They didn't throw him a party. He was just a data analyst, after all. But Tom and a few others took him out for beers. Where are you going? Tom asked over his third beer. Freelance, Brooks Analytics, small clients, flexible schedule. Man, you're really burning all the bridges. First Diana leaves, now you. It's like the soul of the company is bleeding out. Or maybe we're just choosing different paths. Tom studied him for a long moment. You and Diana, there was something there wasn't there. You can tell me now, it doesn't matter anymore. Ethan considered lying out of habit, then realized Tom was right and it didn't matter anymore. Yeah, there was something. I knew it. I fucking knew it. Tom laughed. Good for you, man. Seriously. That woman deserves someone who saw her as a person instead of a title. She did. They finished their beers and said goodbye, and Ethan walked out of Sterling Systems for the last time as an employee. The freedom was dizzying. No more playing politics. No more pretending. Just work he chose with people he wanted to help. Brooks Analytics launched officially on January 27th. His first client was a local restaurant chain that needed better data analysis on customer trends. Simple work, but satisfying. Within 3 weeks, he had 4 more clients. Word spread in the small business community, former Sterling Systems data analyst, available for hire, reasonable rates, quality work. February brought Valentine's Day. Diana had never cared about the holiday, corporate manufactured romance, she called it, but Ethan surprised her with a reservation at a small French restaurant in Belltown. Nothing fancy, just good food and wine, and the luxury of being able to hold hands across the table without worrying who might see. I never did this before. Diana's fingers laced through his. The romance thing. With my ex, it was always working dinners or networking events. We forgot how to just be together. We're good at just being together. We are. She squeezed his hand. Ethan, I need to tell you something. Something I've been thinking about. His heart kicked up. Okay? I want you to move in officially, not just your stuff scattered around my place, but actually live there. Together, make it our home instead of my home that you happen to stay in. She rushed on before he could respond. I know it's only been 4 months since we met, which is crazy, but I don't care. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to come home to you every night. I want this to be us, officially. Yes, the answer came without hesitation. Absolutely yes. Her face lit up. Really? I was actually going to suggest the same thing. I already gave up my apartment lease. All my stuff is there. Where else would I live? She laughed bright and joyful. We're doing this. We're doing this. They toasted with wine, and the rest of dinner passed in comfortable conversation about their businesses, about the clients they were building, about the life they were constructing piece by piece. When they got home that night, they made love, slowly savoring it, and fell asleep, wrapped around each other, with the certainty of people who'd found something worth keeping. March brought Frank's birthday. Diana insisted on cooking, attempting a roast chicken that came out dry but edible. They drove to Ballard on a Sunday afternoon with the chicken and a chocolate cake from the bakery down the street. Frank answered the door with a grin. There's my son and the woman who finally got him to take a risk. Diana blushed. Hi, Mr. Brooks. Frank, please. Mr. Brooks was my father. He pulled her into a hug like she was already family. Come in, come in. I want to hear about this consulting empire you're building. They spent the afternoon in Frank's living room eating dry chicken and good cake, talking about business and life and everything in between. Frank told stories about Ethan as a kid, the time he'd tried to build a treehouse without help, and it collapsed, the time he'd gotten his hands stuck in a pickle jar and they'd had to break it to get him out. Diana laughed until tears streamed down her face. I can't picture Ethan as a clumsy kid. He's so careful now. He got careful after he got hurt. Frank's voice grew more serious. After his mother died, after his divorce, he stopped taking chances, just wanted to stay safe. Then you came along and reminded him that safe isn't the same as living. Diana reached over and took Ethan's hand. He reminded me too. Frank smiled at them both. That's how you know it's right, when you make each other braver. Later in the workshop, Frank pulled Ethan aside while Diana admired a birdhouse he'd been working on. The old man moved to a locked cabinet and pulled out a small wooden box walnut with inlaid maple patterns. Your mother's engagement ring is in here. Frank's hands trembled slightly as he held it. I've been keeping it for you. Knew someday you'd find the right woman. Ethan's throat tightened. Dad, you're going to ask her soon. I can see it. The way you look at her, the way she looks at you, that's forever love. Frank pressed the box into his son's hands. Your mother would want Diana to have this. But if Diana wants something different, that's fine too. What matters is that you do it right, that you ask her properly. I will. Good. Frank pulled him into a hug, and Ethan felt his father's frame thinner than it used to be, more fragile. Don't wait too long, though. Life's short. You think you have all the time in the world, but you don't. That night, driving back to their penthouse, Diana noticed his unusual silence. What did your dad say to you in the workshop? He gave me something. For the future. What kind of something? Ethan glanced at her, then back at the road. A very important something. You'll see when the time is right. She studied his profile for a moment, then smiled and settled back in her seat. I'll wait. April brought spring to Seattle in fits and starts, rain alternating with bright sunny days that made everyone pretend winter was truly over. Sterling's strategy group was thriving. Diana had 12 active clients, now enough that she'd hired an assistant to help with scheduling and paperwork. Brooks Analytics was similarly successful. Ethan had more work than he could handle alone and had started turning down projects that didn't interest him. We should celebrate, Diana announced one evening. They just finished going over their respective financials, and both businesses were solidly in the black. 6 months since I left Sterling Systems. 4 months since you did. We're actually making this work. What did you have in mind? Dinner, somewhere nice. Maybe that place on the waterfront you mentioned. They went on Saturday evening to a seafood restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay. Spring sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. They sat on the patio despite the slight, chill blankets provided by the restaurant, watching ferries cross the water. I never did this either. Diana sipped her wine. just sat and watched the world go by, always rushing to the next meeting, the next call, the next crisis. You miss it being CEO? She considered the question carefully. I miss the adrenaline sometimes, that feeling of making decisions that affect hundreds of people, but I don't miss the weight of it. Don't miss being responsible for everyone else's livelihood. She looked at him. I like this better, building something smaller but more meaningful, working with clients who actually need me instead of just managing bureaucracy. I get that. I like choosing my projects, saying no without worrying about office politics. We're building a good life. She reached across the table for his hand. Aren't we the best life? After dinner, they walked along the waterfront, hands linked, talking about nothing important. When they got back to the parking lot, Ethan stopped beside his car. Wait here a second. He went to the trunk and pulled out the wooden box his father had given Ethan. His heart hammered as he walked back to where Diana stood looking confused. When he dropped to one knee on the asphalt, her hands flew to her mouth. Diana Sterling. His voice shook slightly, but he pushed through. 6 months ago, you knocked on my door at 5 in the morning, and everything changed. You showed me what it means to be brave, to choose happiness over fear, to build something that matters. He opened the box, revealing his mother's ring, simple gold band with a small diamond. I want to spend my life choosing you. Every day. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down her face. Yes, God, yes, of course, yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, perfect fit, like it had been waiting for her, and then she was pulling him up and kissing him and crying and laughing all at once. People walking past clapped and cheered. The sun had set completely now, leaving them in the glow of streetlights and fairy horns in the distance. I love you so much. She pressed her forehead to his. I can't believe you did this. My dad gave me the ring. It was my mother's, but if you want something different, no, this is perfect. She's perfect. Something that. Diana held up her hand, watching the diamond catch the light. When, when do you want to get married? Soon. I don't want to wait. I've waited long enough for everything else in my life. I don't want to wait for this. They settled on August. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Diana's mother, if she was well enough to travel. Frank, obviously. Tom and a few other friends from Sterling Systems. Susan Mitchell from the board, who'd been Diana's ally through everything. No big production, no wedding planner, just them choosing each other in front of the people who mattered. The next months passed in a blur of planning and work. Diana's consulting firm kept growing. She'd hired a second employee and was looking at expanding the office space. Ethan's client list was full enough that he'd started referring overflow to other freelancers, building a small network. They were successful in ways that mattered more than salary or title. In June, Frank had a heart attack. Not fatal, but serious enough to land him in the hospital for 3 days. Ethan and Diana spent those days camped out in the waiting room, taking turns sitting with him, bringing him books and decent coffee when the doctors said he could have it. I'm fine, Frank insisted from his hospital bed. Just a warning shot. Means I need to slow down a little. You need to slow down a lot. Ethan's voice was rough with fear. No more workshop projects. No more climbing ladders to fix gutters. I'm not dead yet, son. Still got some years in me. But Frank's hand trembled when he reached for his water glass. I just need to make it to August. Need to see you two get married. You'll make it. Diana squeezed the old man's other hand. And then you'll make it to see grandchildren if we decide to have them. And then you'll make it to retirement. You're not going anywhere. Frank smiled at her fondly. You're good for him. Best thing that ever happened to my boy. He's the best thing that happened to me, too. Frank recovered slowly but steadily. By July, he was back home with a nurse checking on him twice a week and strict doctor's orders to take it easy. Ethan visited every other day, often bringing Diana with him. They'd have dinner in Frank's kitchen and talk about wedding plans, the small venue they'd rented, the simple menu, the fact that Diana was wearing a cream dress instead of traditional white, because who cared about traditions anyway? August 15th arrived warm and clear, one of those rare, perfect Seattle days where the sky was actually blue. They got married at a small venue on Lake Union with 20 guests watching. Diana wore her cream dress and carried wildflowers. Ethan wore a suit his father had helped him pick out. Frank stood as best man, despite the doctor's concerns, looking proud and healthy in the moment. The ceremony lasted 15 minutes. No religious elements, just them making promises to each other, to show up, to be honest, to choose each other, even when it was hard. When the officiant said they could kiss, Ethan pulled Diana close and kissed her thoroughly while everyone clapped. They were married. The reception was simple catered dinner, good wine, a playlist instead of a DJ. Grace had made it up from Oregon looking frail but determined. She hugged Diana for a long time, whispering something Ethan couldn't hear that made Diana cry happy tears. "You did good, honey." Grace pulled back to look at her daughter. "This is what I wanted for you. Someone who sees you, really sees you." Tom gave a rambling toast about how he'd always suspected there was something between them, and he was glad they'd finally made it official. Susan Mitchell gave a more eloquent toast about watching Diana build her career and being proud to see her build a life. And Frank stood up last hand, shaking slightly as he held his glass. "My son was lost for a while, played it safe, kept his head down, didn't want to risk getting hurt again." His voice carried clearly despite his age. Then Diana showed up and reminded him that the best work, the work that really matters, requires risk. That you can't build anything worth keeping if you're afraid to throw 'em. He raised his glass. To Diana and Ethan, to taking risks, to building things that last. Everyone drank and Ethan felt emotion thicken his throat. Later, dancing slowly with Diana while the sun set over the lake, he whispered, "This is perfect. It really is. I can't believe 6 months ago I was living in my crappy apartment pretending to be fine. And I was going home to an empty penthouse every night pretending success was enough." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Look at us now." "Yeah, look at us now." They spent their wedding night at a small bed and breakfast on Bainbridge Island. No honeymoon trip, neither of them wanted to leave their businesses that long, just a weekend away. They made love slowly savoring it and fell asleep wrapped around each other with matching gold bands on their fingers. One night in late December, Ethan woke to find Diana sitting by the windows in their bedroom, staring out at the city lights. He checked the clock, 4:47 a.m., almost exactly 1 year since that first knock on his door. "Can't sleep." He joined her at the window. "I was thinking about that morning, how desperate I was, how lost. I drove to your apartment at 4:30 in the morning because I couldn't stand my own company anymore." She leaned into him. "I didn't know what I was looking for. Just knew I needed something different. And you found it. We found it. Both of us." She turned to look at him, eyes reflecting city lights. "Remember what you said that morning? That anyone who makes you feel like you're too much is really just saying you're more than they can handle." "I remember. That was the moment I knew. When you said that, I knew you were different. That you saw me instead of the title. That you weren't afraid of who I actually was." Her voice grew thick. "Thank you for not being afraid of me. Thank you for knocking on my door." They stood together at the window watching the city wake up, and when the clock hit 5 a.m., Ethan wrapped his arms around his wife and held her close. 1 year ago, his carefully controlled life had been interrupted by 3 knocks and a desperate voice. Now his life was anything but controlled, messy, and complicated, and absolutely perfect in its imperfection. "We should go back to bed," Dinah murmured against his chest. "Or we could make coffee and watch the sunrise. I like that better." They went to the kitchen and made coffee together, comfortable routine they'd developed over the past year. Carried their mugs back to the windows and watched dawn break over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Ethan thought about his small apartment with the cheap furniture and the old coffee maker. About Sarah walking away because he wasn't ambitious enough. About the 3 years he'd spent convinced that safe was the same as content. About his father teaching him woodworking in a garage workshop, explaining that good wood required risk to become something beautiful. And he thought about Diana standing at his door at 5 in the morning, mascara streaked and desperate, asking if she could come in. About choosing to let her. About every choice that followed: coffee shops and acquisitions and board meetings and love confessed in parking garages. About building something together that was stronger than either of them alone. "I love our life," Diana's voice broke his reverie. "Every messy, complicated, wonderful part of it." "Me too." She set down her coffee and turned to him, eyes serious. "Promise me something. Promise we'll never stop choosing each other. Even when it's hard. Even when it would be easier to retreat into old patterns. I promise, every day, for the rest of our lives." She kissed him, then soft and sweet and full of 1 year's worth of choosing each other over fear. And when they finally pulled apart, the sun had fully risen over Seattle, painting their world in light and possibility, and the absolute certainty that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is open a door at 5 in the morning and let someone in.